Well, welcome to my editing office here. We are going to do a video about the pond. So this is my office view for the days that I have to work from home. You can come out here and we're going to talk about this pond. A deep dive, literally, into the pond. Okay, so let's talk about the pond. We'll talk about how it's designed. We'll talk about everything in it, how I planted it out, chemistry issues, things you should watch out for. There's some actual life or death stuff with the pond. So if you're going to build a natural ecosystem pond, whether it's one type or another type, this type is an aquascape one, you should know what you should be looking out for. Well, you can see I kind of stirred up a little bit of the algae from the bottom of this pond, and that's because this pond is an actual, truly living ecosystem. I don't really do a whole lot on this pond, and I really want to encourage a natural balance to hit. So let's talk about the overall design of the pond, the design philosophies, and maybe before we get into that, I'll answer the question that everyone wants to know, and that's the price. How much did this cost? Okay, so this pond certainly wasn't cheap. The pond cost me about $200,000, and that's a lot of money. And I basically have been saving up my entire life for something like this. This is actually one of the biggest reasons why I live so minimally my entire life, is because it snowballs, and hopefully then you can afford some nice stuff when you're older. It's getting harder and harder every year, but this is not something I want to get into in this video. I don't want to turn this into like an economics rant. But the pond was extremely expensive, 200,000 Canadian. Now the thing that offsets that is my average maintenance costs for this pond are exactly $0. I have bought some fish food in the past just to kind of have fun with the fish. I guess maybe it's more like 50 bucks because I have bought some cold water bacteria that I put into the pond every single winter, kind of at the end of the winter, just to give a nice kickstart to the bacteria levels in the pond. I don't know if that's necessary, especially long term, but I thought I'd do it for the first couple years. And then there's the electricity to run the pump, which before I got the solar panels was roughly about $1,000 a year, $600 to $1,000 a year. That's for 3 large pumps. But now because we have the solar power, it's free. So for us, the actual ongoing maintenance of this pond is $0. And in fact, we're starting to grow things like bloody dock and petunias and watercress and lotus, and then there's the fish in the pond. So it's arguably that this pond has now transitioned into an income stream, albeit right now very negligible. My idea with the fish is that I need some kind of animal life in order to complete the cycle for both nitrogen and carbon. And I thought we would grow koi because first off, they're a bottom feeding river fish, so they'll kind of suck the algae off the bottom of the pond. That's a really, really useful thing to have. They're also fairly docile in their temperament. That's kind of good for if you want to have kids swimming in there, or if you want to reproduce your fish. They won't really eat all the fry like something like a goldfish might, or bass, for example. It's not cold enough to grow trout, but we could probably grow tilapia for a food yield. But I think I kind of prioritized getting something growing that will start reproducing and then returning money on investment. So koi sell very, very well, especially when they're a little bit older. And I wanted to use that as an income stream to help balance off the significant cost of this pond. Now, you don't need to do a pond as expensive as I did. Mine is expensive because of a few things. First off is how much rock we actually did. The second thing is the size of the underground reservoir, which we'll talk about later. the quality of the EPDM pond liner, which in my mind there's no single thing that's more important that you spend a lot of money to get a quality product than your liner of your pond. And then we wanted really good flow for really good oxygen, so we got with 3 pumps and 1 very large duty, what I call a party pump. So we do have a lot of extra costs. Another major cost was the rock. We wanted to go local as we could, because the carbon footprint of trucking in all that rock was kind of weighing on me. So we went with a very local source of rock. The side benefit of that is that the pond looks like it belongs here because the rock is from this area. We also went with a lot of rock because I think it's, as an engineer, it's really important to keep the sun UV light off of the liner. So there is no space in my pond where we have exposed liner to the sun UV. That's going to really help with the long-term stability of the pond liner. Okay, so let's talk about all of these design features that we put in. But I do want you to know that a hole in the ground will be a pond. You might have anaerobic problems. Those anaerobic problems can cause life-threatening issues for you and your family. So I would just caution just going out and putting a hole in the ground and then swimming in it. I think it's really important that we use a little bit of science and information that we already know about the dangers of anaerobic water. So you really do want to make sure your pond is well oxygenated. And if you go through the features, these design features that we use in our pond in your own builds, even if you can't do them to the same scale or level, if you can find another way to do the same idea, then you can really help with first quickly getting a nice clean water, a nice balance going for the ecosystem, getting healthy aerobic bacteria into your pond, and avoiding pathogens that can literally kill you and your children. So let's talk about the design. Okay, so the main body of water, the main volume of water, is roughly 20 feet by 40 feet. And it's got a few key features coming off of it, like a wetland filter. We've got the waterfall section, and I'll talk about all those later. But that's the general size of our pond. And then we have 3 layers, 1, 2, 3, 4 layers. So we've got the phototropic layer, which is roughly 1.5 feet deep. Then 2 feet below that, we've got another layer. 2 feet below that, we've got a layer that then gets you to kind of a shallow end, where a human, an adult human standing up is going to be roughly to around just over their belly button area to, you know, their chest. And that way you can sit down on this inner layer. See that nice little seat rock that we've designed in? So you can sit down there and you can have some drinks and chill and hang out with people. You can stand up and just talk. And then we can also hop into the deep end where you can swim and not touch the bottom. So this deep end here is 6 feet deep. And then when you figure your shoulders and head are above the water, you know, for all but the tallest people, you're going to have an area where you can swim with without touching the bottom. You'll see I've done a lot of work on the planting area around the pond, which we'll get to later. But I just want to point out some of the life that you're seeing, like the monarch butterflies there, the dragonflies. The goal of this ecosystem pond is the ecosystem. It's to be the beating heart of my food forest. And then as a side effect, you know, it's water for me and my kids, it's potential income stream and all these kind of nice things. But it's a source of water for birds and wildlife, and it's a source of plants and water for the insects that we all critically depend on. So we're trying to save the planet by building a pond and having it look pretty sweet. Now the design features of the main body of the pond is such that you really want a phototropic layer, and this is that shallow end coming in here. And ideally you want that populated completely with plants. So we're still working on that. We've got some water lotus. We're trying to spread plants cheaply. You got some irises in the back. We've got some watercress. We've got petunias and bloody dock and a lot of edible plants in there. And then we've got lilies, native lilies. And we're trying to kind of fill that out, but not go ahead and spend $4,000 on plants. So we're going to do it slowly, and we're going to spread and do propagation for a lot of that. That phototropic layer, though, it's really important because it's going to be what heats your pond up. It's your water heater. So it's really important to have that thermal mass of rock be within, like, you know, a little 2 foot, 1 foot shelf. And that's really going to heat the pond up and get it to a comfortable level where not only the fish are going to wake up sooner in the season, but you're going to get to actually use it. The plants will start growing sooner, start doing more photosynthesis, and then you're going to start kind of getting that ecosystem balance. The lower, deepest layer is really important because the deeper you go in a lake or a pond, the more oxygen capacity you have to hold. One reason is that the water actually gets colder, and when the water gets colder, the molecules get closer together, and that lets you hold more oxygen. As the molecules spread out, as the water gets warmer, that oxygen that's kind of entrained in the water can actually escape. So the colder the water is, the more oxygen capacity you have. Now, at the same time, it can be the oxygen depleted zone because the waterfall comes down and oxygenates everything. That high oxygen water flows to the outflow of this main body of water, and then not as much gets down to the bottom. For that reason, we have suction from one of the pumps coming down there. So there's two things I want to talk about now that I just mentioned. First off is the fact that we've got the waterfall on the complete opposite side of the outflow. So I'll go show you that outflow. The second thing is that we've got pump suction happening from the deep end, returning that back up to the waterfall. So you're taking the most oxygen depleted water and you're returning it back to get oxygenated right away. Okay, so let's first talk about the design of that outflow. We'll go take a look right around that corner. Okay, I hope I'm in the shot. So where we are here is we're right at the outlet of the actual pond. This is where the pumps raise the water, and all of that ends up going to the lowest point. This lowest point, we've actually choked it in. And what that does is it actually creates a high flow over the lowest point. This high flow is going to drag all of the surface debris out over top of the pond and send it down to the rest of the pond. It's really, really important if you have trees around the pond that are going to drop leaves in. You want those leaves to not necessarily all settle and fall down to the bottom of the pond. Some is okay because you do want some decomposition, but you don't want tons, especially if you're going to have a lower pH in your pond, because they're going to make carbon in the water, and that's actually going to make carbonic acid, and it can actually make your pond acidic. You do want your pond somewhere between 6.5 and 7.5 pH, so you do want something roughly around neutral. But what this choke point actually acts as is it acts as a skimmer. So this will pull all the surface debris out and send it along its way to what is the natural skimmer basket. Let's go take a look at where this goes. You know, I really want continuity in this video, so we're actually just going to literally jump down and walk through my pond, moving some of these native wildflowers and plants out of the way as we jump down in there. Okay, so one thing you can see is that in some of these areas we do get a little buildup of algae. Now, we've actually been out of the area camping and hiking in Algonquin Park. I'll probably do a video on that. But the reason why this algae is built up is because we've kind of been gone. And this is what you can expect from about 5 days worth of just not being around in, you know, the super summer heat. So this goes over a little log waterfall here, and I just want to make sure that I don't damage any of that as I walk. We've got lots of life living in here. We've got lots of plant life, you know, heading out, almost acting as mangrove trees here, growing right in the water and stabilizing the flows and acting as a filter. So it's really neat how you see some of these parallels to different biological ecosystems on the planet. And what this is here is this is just kind of a little bit of a winding river, and I really wanted a nice winding stream here. And this is as overflowed with algae as it typically will ever get. And it's basically because it's the complete middle of the summer and the water's nice and warm. It's probably about 82 degrees right now in here. And actually this warmer river section is probably closer to 90 degrees. Really nice and warm. But it does mean that the algae does really well in here. Now, that's not the worst thing in the world, because algae can be good for a pond in a balance. In fact, you do want some in all ponds. You want the right type of algae though, and we'll talk about that in a bit. You really want that filamentous algae. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. But what we do now is we go over another waterfall where we re-oxygenate the water, and we head down to the bottom, which is our skimmer basket. You can see, because we haven't been here in about 6 days down here to clean that out, that it's collecting and it's getting full. For me, this is wonderful compost, but this is the realities of living with an ecosystem pond. The clean water up there is because all of this skimmer and filter function is working really well. That sends it all down here, so we do have to clean that out once in a while. And you can see all around here, I've really tried to get a tremendous diversity of flowers. This is what I call my insect hill, my wildflower hill. And this is an area of my land that I devote entirely to nature to try to help the collapsing bug ecosystem. And this is maybe my favorite place on the whole property. Okay, so let's talk about what exactly is under the skimmer basket. What is that thing there? Okay, so the thing to keep in mind with this skimmer basket and the amount of algae that you see is that this is literally the worst time of the season for algae. It's not usually to this level, and I haven't come down here for a week at all to scoop any of it out. So the only maintenance that I do have in this pond is a little bit on the algae side. I'll talk about why I think it's a little worse than it will be long term, just because I'm still establishing that balance. And with the limestone rock, it's creating a bit of a high pH situation, which is promoting the algae. Now, it's not something that I mind, but it is something that could turn someone off of a natural pond. But again, I think it does take time to establish a balance, and you have to have faith that you'll get there. And I do have faith, and I'm hoping that I will get there, because it is a little bit of a chore, but it's not so bad because the yield out of the chore is good compost. Okay, so this lower area is not just the skimmer basket, it's actually the pump reservoir, and specifically it's an underground pump reservoir. This is really important because it mimics what a natural underground aquifer will do. Its volume is actually about just under a half of the volume of my 20,000 gallon pond. And the idea is that there's so much turnover in the pond that for 1/3 of the life cycle of the water, it's spending its time underground. And this is really important because that's where any entrained algae will go underground, get out of the sun, and will actually die. Not only that, but it provides me a reservoir of water that acts as a fuel gauge to tell me how much water I have in my pond based on how much evaporation and splashing I have compared to how much rain I'm getting to refill that. The water volume will go through a cycle, and if it doesn't rain in a while, you get lots of evaporation from the heat, you get lots of splashing from the waterfalls and water loss to the atmosphere, and without getting any more rain in, the water level of the pond will fall. Now the pond itself, its water level won't fall, but the reservoir will. So here we have our pumps. Our pumps go down deep below, and they take suction from the bottom of this 10-foot deep by roughly, 14 feet by 8 feet reservoir. So let's take a look at these pond pumps. And we have 2 of them here, and they're currently on. And you can hear that there's actually some volume there. And you can see actually that the reservoir now is empty. So we've actually got to refill that. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how I actually do that. We don't use house tap water. To do that, we're going to go way in the back there. Okay, now if you actually don't have what I have on this property, which is an artesian well, then one of the maintenance costs for your pond will absolutely be refilling it when you're not getting a lot of rain. I don't know about you guys, I'm pretty sure you're similar to me, but we have had one rainy day in probably about the last 60, and it's been pretty hot. So, you can see the grass that I don't water is pretty much dying. Everywhere around me is dying much worse than this because we actually put clover in our grass, which helps tremendously with drought. But everything around us is drying up and dying because we have had like no rain at all. For that reason, the amount of heat and evaporation that's caused during the day, we've actually lost water level at our pond. We got to refill it. Now, on land selection for your permaculture sites, I talk about different priorities. This is another video I have that I'll link up here. But I talk about different priorities that you should focus on. And number one is access to water. If you can find it, it's fantastic. That means a stream, or ideally, even better than a stream, is a pressurized artesian well. And let's go take a look at mine, and then I'll tell you exactly how it works. You can hear how dry it is. Crunch, crunch, crunch. We're like walking on wood. Okay, so back here, we've got our artesian well. And our land sits on two giant granite plates that are on top of each other. And between them is actually an underground aquifer. And it's fed from the above ground, the above higher elevation lands all around our city and county. And what that means is that there's a pressurized source of water under the ground. So our house is actually on an artesian well. So when we drill down for our well, we access this pressurized source of water. And because of that, it actually has an overflow. And any excess pressure will leak out of this area here. And this runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. This runs all the time. And then we have a little pond here, just like a hand dug pond that's lined with bentonite clay. And then we've dropped a little sump pump into this. And you can see we grow duckweed for the chickens in here. And here's the little sump pump. And we just plugged it in. So it is cooking away. So we suck out of there. It's got a constant flow in of roughly that. That's less than the artesian well, or than this little sump pump can push out. So even when we turn this on, all it does is reduce the amount of overflow downstream into the natural rivers here. And this artesian well has been going for about 50 years now. So even if we wanted to get rid of it, we would have to apply to the city to get rid of it, because it's actually part of the natural flow of water now to all the local waterways. So what we do is just flip that on. We've got the solar panels up on the house, so the power is free for us as well to pump it over here, and then we'll top this pond up. Okay, so we got the flow of water coming in here, and we're going to try to get it to splash on the water to get some oxygen in as well. And we'll run that probably for about an hour or two, and that'll top us up. And that'll be good for probably another couple weeks, at least maybe even upwards of a month of evaporation. Okay, so we talked about the lower area. The pond pumps at the lower area, they take suction from down at that underground reservoir, and they send it in two spots. One is the wetland filter, which is right there, and we'll talk about that in detail. And then the other one goes to the top of this waterfall. Top of the waterfall has two entry points for water, and the second one comes from the party pump, which is a huge pump that takes suction from the bottom of the pond, and that is located here. Let's hop down here. Okay, so down here we've got a pond pump, and I have planted some stuff around it to keep the sun off of it and the sound down. And we've got the pump down in here. Okay, so there it is. So we've got all this stuff planted around it to keep the noise down pretty much. And also keep dust and everything from getting into it, because any water that hits these and just kind of, falls down. Keeps the heat off it, keeps the running temps down. It's using nature as an aid to helping the pond pump work. The only thing you have to watch out for is that you do have enough airflow, that you don't block the pond pump, but there's plenty of air that gets in through all those leaves. So the big pond pump is down there, and you can kind of hear the volume of it. So that's how loud it runs. Ideally, it would be a little quieter, but that is the loudest part of our system. And it's the only thing that detracts you from the fact that this looks like it's always been here and there's nothing man-made about this. Here's the water coming in here. Okay, so that pond pump takes suction from the deep end and basically just recycles it from deep end to the waterfall and back to the pond pump. So because of that, that flow of water will actually not change the water level of the pond overall. It's just recycling it in a closed loop. You know, it's got the waterfall involved, but it's really just taking oxygen depleted water, putting it in, and immediately re-oxygenating it, and just creating an extra turnover of that water. However, the other two pumps are the ones that take water from down below, put them into the wetland and the waterfall, and then exit. When I turn those two pumps off at the bottom, then the water in the pond is slightly higher and it will overflow. However, as the water comes down, as water leaves the system, then flow will stop over the overflow, and all I will have is this closed loop circuit here. And then when I turn those bottom pumps back on, they'll push water into the wetland, they'll push water into this waterfall. That'll raise the water level of the pond, and then it'll get to the point where it flows over that outlet down the winding stream on the back and then into the lower reservoir. Okay, so why do we have a wetland filter? And then we'll maybe on the way just show some of this awesome waterfall up here. We'll walk over and some of the planting that we have around here, like perennial onions. These are called Egyptian walking onions. We've got sunflowers, we've got kiwi, which is a cold hardy kiwi. We've got haskcaps, which is called honeyberry. We've got fiddleheads. We've got elm trees, chocolate mint growing in there, and more sunflowers. We've got pawpaws up here, which is North America's largest fruit. We've got a pawpaw there, a pawpaw here, and one just around the corner you can't really see. So here we are at the top of the waterfall. And we've got two inlets, one here and one here. One is the big party pump, which is this side here, and it's just underneath. I wonder if I can get in there. It's just, I don't want to step on any frogs, and the frogs just love it in here. Let's see if I can get in. I'll hop in the middle. Okay, so here's the upper waterfall, and we've hidden it all with rocks and moss, so it looks very natural. But under here we've got two plastic spillway plates, and the big pump pumps into this one, the small pump pumps into that one. It joins this common reservoir into this common area. It splits around this rock and goes halfway down this side, halfway down this side. And each time we're trying to get it where it oxygenates water and then joins back in and then eventually rejoins into the main pond. This main waterfall is where most of our water comes in. We do have the second waterfall at the bottom on that side, but tumbling areas is a major design feature that you need to incorporate into your ponds, especially if you want to incorporate and attract oxygen-loving insect predators such as dragonflies. So one of the beneficial parts of this pond is attracting really healthy insect predators. And predators are really important because we want to balance the insect pest pressure on all of our fruit trees. We do that a lot in this wetland here. So this wetland, it actually acts as a massive magnification source for life. It acts as a spawning point, spawning ground for the fish. It acts as a wonderful warm area for frogs, which then brings us snakes, and snakes eat the rodents that can potentially damage our fruit trees. And it really magnifies the entire ecosystem balance by having a wetland. Now, the wetland also functions as a microbiological filter and cleaner. And that's because the water that comes from that bottom area doesn't just come in at the top of this wetland somewhere here. This wetland is actually 6 feet deep, and it's a solid body of rock all the way down. the wetland, or the pumps from the bottom come into the bottom of this wetland and they push up through it. And because of the small rocks that we have inside there and all the plant roots that push down to try to get in there, we actually get a lot of biological filtering from the bacteria that colonize between the rocks and then also from the plant roots. And this is how we can filter out any pathogens and toxins that get into the plant. For that reason, we've chosen very aggressive growing plants like irises. Irises might be something that's sending some people in panic mode. Don't plant irises because they'll take over your pond. Well, we specifically plant irises because we want them to take over this section of our pond. They don't necessarily like the deeper areas, so they're not going to get out there. If they go in all around here, that's great. We like that. They'll act as further filtration and insect habitat. But you can see that this area is just teeming with so much insect life because of the way that we plant around it and because of the cleanliness of the water, the oxygen in the water. And it's really all about creating this ecosystem so that, maybe you're growing your plums. This is a beautiful American plum tree, and it's surrounded by yarrow, which is this beautiful umbrella-shaped flower. Brings in tons and tons and tons of insect predators and very small pollinators. We've got all sorts of wild but native wildflowers, and the insect activity down here is just absolutely tremendous. Okay, so recap time. What are the main design features of a pond? First off, you need a reservoir of water. Everyone's gonna create a hole in the ground that has a reservoir of water. Second thing you want is you want to have a good liner. Now, if you use a natural liner like bentonite clay, or you line it with organic methods like putting horse manure and glaying your pond, you want to do something ideally that is long lasting and is not going to cause you problems down the road. If I get a hole somewhere in this pond, it's going to be very difficult to find. So for that reason, I really wanted to go with an engineered solution, the thickest, most stable pond liner possible. It is plastic. It's the one area I conceded on, permaculture notions of trying to use natural organic materials, but I think it's important enough that this pond and ecosystem stay stable and doesn't die out. For that reason, I think there's more benefit to going with a thick lined EPDM liner pond, and that way we actually have stability and we can count on this thing lasting longer than I'll ever live. And you keep that from happening by ensuring that there's no exposed liner anywhere. You can't see any liner whatsoever on my pond. It's liner with rock on top of it, with plants on top of that, everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Even on the side where there might be liner, we get wood chips and plants growing in to shade it out. So you want to line your body of water, and then you want to have oxygen flow into it. This is so incredibly crucial because if your water goes anaerobic, you can get giardia. You can also get toxic bacteria and algae. You want to really make sure that you get filamentous algae and not like a blue-green algae. These can be actually lethal and deadly, so be really, really careful. Look them up, look what they look like, and make sure that you know which one you have. And then we want to get flow in from one side, you want to get flow out from the other side so that the water is dragged across your pond. That distributes the oxygen, but it also acts as a skimming effect to pull surface material over the edge. Then you want to have that land into a skimmer. We kind of run it through that little stream, but you want to land it into a skimmer box, which is basically an underground reservoir made up of essentially a tank. Actually, I didn't show that. Let me just go quickly show you what that's made out of. It's basically made out of these empty plastic milk crates, and these empty plastic milk crates are 90% empty open air, and you stack them on top of each other and it makes a pond. So you put a pond liner and then you stack these milk crates in, and it actually makes an underground reservoir, a tank. So I'll see if I can uncover one. It'll be in here somewhere. So do you see this here? This is one of the milk crates, and it's basically just these lined milk crates stacked on top of each other. And if any of this algae gets down in there, I can throw a little dredge pump down, and I do that pretty much once a year. I didn't do it this year, but I can do that once a year, and that'll suck all that stuff out from the bottom of that tank. But the rocks, if you keep the rocks there, especially the nice smaller ones, then that'll kind of trap this algae, and then you can scoop it off and get rid of it. But this whole tank is a layered milk crate tank with a giant pond liner to hold the actual water. So you want to have some form of water being held underground, and that simulates and replicates the benefits of an underground water aquifer, and that keeps some of the water's life cycle out of the air to kill some of the algae. We've just got so many bees and bugs, and it's fantastic because I'm surrounded by all this insect life, but it's not bothering me because it's all in balance. It's not like I'm surrounded by mosquitoes or something. There's just tons of insect life everywhere. And part of it is the way I plant, clearly, but a big part of it is just having water, access to clean, fresh water. This water is the source of all life. So we've got our reservoir of water. Going back to our recap, our reservoir of water, our tumbling zones. We've got our underground reservoir of water. So we have 2 reservoirs of water. And we've got our wetland filter. It's popping up here through all the wildflowers. We've got our underground reservoir pumping into our wetland filter. This acts as biological cleaning as well as a phototropic layer, a nice thin water layer with a thermal mass underneath it to heat it up. We've got that phototropic layer spread out all through the actual pond. And those are the main features that you want to get incorporated into your pond. So I hope you enjoyed this video, a little bit more of a deep dive and a deeper walk around the Aquascape Ecosystem Pond, how I'm running it. I'm sure I run it differently than almost everyone on the planet because I run it extreme on the end of letting nature do what it wants and just planting tons of plants for nature all around it. This pond is a gift, not just to me paying myself back for all the hard saving and hard work I've done through my life, but it's me paying that back to nature in a way that provides my soul the medicine that it needs, and I can grow miracle health berries like sea buckthorn and peaches and plums and service berries all around it, and enjoy all the living beings that come and actually live with me in this area. So thanks for watching, everyone, and I will see you on the next video.